3 months ago, I stood beside my husband's coffin, clutching our scorched wedding rings found in the wreckage of a fatal car crash. My world collapsed. The police said there was barely anything left to identify, just a blood-stained scrap of fabric and his wallet. I believed them. I cried until my body gave out. I even tried to take my own life. But that afternoon, under the grey skies of a sleepy Sacramento suburb, everything I thought I knew shattered again. He walked out of a Mexican restaurant, alive, breathing, laughing. He wiped salsa off a young woman's cheek and smiled at her like he'd done it 1,000 times. I froze. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and chose not to. Either way, I stood there like a ghost, watching the man I buried walk away with another woman as if I'd never existed. And in that moment, I understood something more terrifying than death itself. He hadn't left this world. He had just left me. I followed him. I didn't even think. My body moved before my brain caught up. I stayed across the street, ducking behind cars, trees, anything. I didn't care how insane I looked. I just knew I needed to see more. He walked like Jacob. Same relaxed stride. Same subtle limp on the left foot from the accident 5 years ago. He even ran his hand through his hair the exact way Jacob always did when he was deep in thought. But he was supposed to be dead. The woman next to him was tall, younger than me, maybe late 20s. Her hair was curled, flawless. They laughed like they'd known each other forever. She held onto his arm as if she'd never lost him, as if I had never existed. They stopped at a black SUV. He opened the passenger door for her, something Jacob hadn't done for me in years. As she got in, he looked around briefly. For a second, I swore his eyes swept over me. My breath caught. Then he got in and drove off, leaving me standing there, shaking like a leaf in a storm. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with all the lights off, replaying every second of what I saw. I zoomed in on the photo I managed to snap with my phone. It was blurry, but it was him. No one else would notice the way his left ear folded slightly, or that mole on his neck. But I did. I knew every inch of Jacob, every scar, every freckle. That man was him. The next morning, I called the detective who handled Jacob's case, Detective Ruiz. I told him everything I saw. He paused for a long time before answering. "Mom, are you taking your meds?" It was like a slap across the face. I slammed the phone down. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't imagining things, but if no one else was going to help me, I'd find out the truth myself. I started by revisiting the crash site. It had been cleaned up, of course, nothing but scorched trees and faded tire marks. But something in me needed to stand there again. I closed my eyes and tried to remember everything. The call from the hospital, the sealed casket, the priest refusing to let us open it, all because of the condition of the body, they said. What if there was no body? What if the whole thing had been staged? That night, I broke into Jacob's old laptop. I still remembered his password, our wedding date. I hadn't touched it since he died. At first, it was just the usual stuff. Work emails, grocery lists, vacation plans. But then I found a folder hidden inside another folder called Work Backups. Inside was a document titled simply Exit Plan. The document was short, barely a page, but every word was a punch to the gut. Exit Plan, Phase 1, Disengagement. It listed bullet points like transfer funds to untraceable account, stage accident, fire damage essential, avoid direct communication for 90 days, alias Mark Elwood. Mark Elwood. I repeated the name over and over again. Was that what he was calling himself now? I drove straight to the county records office the next morning. My hands were trembling so badly, I could barely sign in. I told the clerk I wanted to review Jacob Monroe's death certificate, my husband's. She typed for a moment, then frowned. "Are you sure you have the right name? There's no death certificate listed under Jacob Monroe for that date." I stared at her. "What do you mean? He died on October 11th. Car crash on I-5. He was brought to Mercy Hospital, room 403. She typed again, clicked through different screens. Then she shook her head. "There is a record for a fatal crash on that date, but the deceased listed is Michael D. Harmon." I blinked. I had never heard that name before. "Can I see the file?" She hesitated. "You're not listed as next of kin." I left the building with my heart pounding so loud it felt like thunder in my ears. Michael D. Harmon. Had Jacob faked his own death using someone else's identity? Or had someone else died in his place? My next stop was the hospital. Mercy. The same hallway I'd walked down 3 months ago, sobbing, feeling like I couldn't breathe. I asked to see records for room 403, October 11th. The nurse behind the counter was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am, those records are sealed." "Under whose name?" "I'm afraid I can't say." I leaned in. "Please. My husband died here, Jacob Monroe. You can't imagine what I've gone through." Her eyes softened just a little. There was no Jacob Monroe admitted here that day. Only Michael Harmon, died on arrival. I felt the floor slip beneath me. So either the body in that room wasn't Jacob, or there never was a body at all. I sat in my car for a long time afterward, trying to connect the dots. I remembered how no one was allowed to see him, how the funeral director insisted the casket remain closed, how my mother-in-law had looked, almost relieved at the funeral, like a weight had been lifted. It had all felt strange at the time. But grief is a fog. It makes you ignore the obvious. Until it punches you in the face. My husband had erased himself, or someone had helped him do it. And now he was living a new life under a different name, with a different woman. And I was the last one to know. I went home and tore the house apart. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Anything that would confirm what I'd seen, what I'd uncovered. I opened every drawer, searched every coat pocket, even flipped the mattresses. Hours passed in a blur until I got to the old toolbox in the garage. Jacob used to keep it locked, but the key was still hanging on the wall like he never left. Inside, beneath layers of dust and rusted nails, I found a small black notebook. It was cracked, the spine barely holding together. It looked old, older than our marriage. I opened the first page and instantly my skin prickled. Rows and rows of handwritten numbers, no dates, no titles, just sequences like 516, 3, 419, 1091, 1132, 1140, PO, Suji 928F3. I flipped through these pages. The entire notebook was filled with strange codes, times, letters, numbers, and names I didn't recognize. At the back there was a rough sketch of a map. Highways, exits, and what looked like safe houses marked with tiny red stars. This wasn't a man planning a new life. This was someone running from something, or preparing for something. I didn't know who to trust, but I needed help deciphering the notebook. So I did the one thing I promised myself I'd never do. I called his mother. When she picked up, her voice was tight, cold. "Is something wrong?" she asked, as if Jacob hadn't been dead for 3 months. "I saw him," I said quietly. "He's alive." There was silence, not confusion, not disbelief, just silence. I found something in his things, a notebook full of numbers, maps, codes. Still no reaction. "I'm not crazy," I whispered. "I know what I saw." She finally spoke. "Then you better stop looking." "What does that mean?" "It means if you care about Jacob, really care about him, you'll leave this alone." "Do you understand?" "You knew," my voice cracked. I knew parts, not everything. Enough to understand that if he disappeared, it was for a reason. She hung up. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the notebook like it might burn a hole in my hand. My head was spinning. Why wouldn't she be shocked? Why wouldn't she ask questions, or want to see him again? I turned back to the codes. There was one set of numbers that repeated 3 times throughout the notebook. 415410, 873360. Coordinates. I plugged them into my phone. It was a location in Indiana, a small industrial town near Gary. Why would he go there? And then I saw it, scribbled next to the coordinates on the final page. "In case of emergency, contact Victor." Victor. I didn't know anyone named Victor, but clearly he did. My husband wasn't just running. He had a plan, a network, and a secret life that had nothing to do with me. I couldn't sleep. The name Victor looped in my mind like a haunting melody, but the coordinates haunted me more. Why Indiana? What did it mean? I decided to take the notebook to someone who might actually tell me the truth. My mother-in-law, Lorraine. I hadn't spoken to her since the funeral. The few times I'd tried, she either ignored my calls or answered with tired, short words like, "I need time," or "I can't talk right now." But this time I didn't ask. I showed up. She opened the door wearing a silk robe, her eyes puffy like she hadn't slept in weeks. When she saw me, she didn't even pretend to smile. "Why are you here?" "I saw him," I said. No build-up, no hesitation. "Jacob, he's alive." She didn't move, not a blink, just stared at me like she already knew what I was going to say. I found this, I added, holding up the notebook. It's his handwriting, codes, maps, coordinates, and this name, Victor. Do you know him? The moment I said this name, something in her broke. Her knees gave out, and she clutched the doorframe like the ground had shifted under her. I rushed to catch her. She sank into the foyer floor, trembling. You weren't supposed to find that, she whispered. He told me, if anything ever happened, burn it. You knew? She nodded slowly, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. Not everything, just that he was in trouble. Real trouble. The kind that follows you forever. What kind of trouble? She looked up at me, her voice barely audible. It started long before he met you. He was involved in something. He called it just work, but I knew it was more. There were people, powerful people. One day he came home bleeding, said someone named Victor saved his life. I knelt beside her. Is Victor dangerous? No, she said. He was Jacob's handler. And her. Handler? Jacob worked in intelligence. Not for the government, for something outside it. They paid well, trained him, protected him, until they didn't. I felt the breath leave my body. My husband, the man who hated airport security and forgot our anniversary 3 years in a row, was some kind of covert agent. She touched my hand. He wanted out, but they don't let people just leave. So he faked his death. She nodded again. He came to me the night before the crash, said goodbye, said if I ever saw you again, to tell you nothing, for your safety. I stood up, heart racing. But you didn't. You said nothing. You let me bury an empty casket. Her face crumbled. Because I knew you'd never stop looking if I did. I felt a fury rise inside me, but underneath it, something colder. The realization that everyone had been lying to me. My husband, his mother. And now, someone named Victor was out there, holding the keys to this entire web. I didn't plan to tell my daughter anything. She was 12, sensitive, too smart for her own good. I thought I was protecting her by keeping her in the dark. But kids know. They always know. That morning I found her in the laundry room, crying silently, holding something in her hands. What is that, I asked. She looked up at me, her face red and wet. It was in the cat food bin. She handed me a folded, yellowed envelope. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the handwriting. It was Jacob's. The envelope was addressed to me, but inside was a note meant for her. If you're reading this, Sweet Pea, it means things didn't go the way I planned. I'm sorry. I wanted to be there for your science fair, for prom, for the day you tell me about your first crush. But sometimes life doesn't let us choose our ending. You're braver than me, smarter and stronger. Don't let this world make you small. If you ever doubt how much I love you, just look in the mirror. I'm in your eyes. I sat down hard on the floor. The world tilted. She sniffled beside me. Why did Daddy leave? I didn't know how to answer that. I wrapped my arms around her and whispered, because he thought it was the only way to protect us. But even as I said it, something inside me rejected the words. Protect us or protect himself? After she went to school, I examined the envelope again. Something felt off. The paper was thick, heavier than normal. I held it up to the light. There was a second sheet, hidden, stuck between the folds. This one wasn't addressed to either of us. It was a coded message, different from the numbers in the notebook. This one looked like a cipher, random letters, but some circled. A date stood out clearly at the top. October 5th, 6 days before the supposed crash. I stared at the bottom corner, one word, Victor. This wasn't just a goodbye. It was a contingency plan. Jacob had known things could go wrong. He'd left me breadcrumbs. And now I had more than just coordinates. I had a timeline. I went back to the notebook, matched the circled letters from the cipher to a series of entries written in a different pen. The letters spelled out one sentence. If she finds this, tell her Indiana is not the end. That's when I realized he wasn't just running. He was waiting for the right time or the right person to come find him. And somehow I was part of the plan. I found her. The woman from the restaurant, the one who laughed at his jokes, who walked beside him like she belonged there. I hadn't planned on confronting her. I only wanted to know her name, maybe follow her, see where they lived. But when I saw her alone at a coffee shop downtown, something inside me snapped. I walked straight up to her table and said, That man you were with 3 nights ago. His name is Jacob Monroe. He's my husband." Her face didn't register shock, no guilt, no confusion, just a deep, exhausted sadness. "I know who he is," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "And I know who you are too." I didn't sit. I couldn't. My knees were shaking too hard. "How long have you known him?" "Almost 2 years." I blinked. "That's impossible. He died 3 months ago." "No," she said softly. "That's when you found out." My mouth went dry. "Who are you?" "My name is Claire. I work with Victor. I guess the word is extraction specialist. I help people disappear." She took a sip of her coffee like we were talking about taxes. "So he paid you to fake his death?" She shook her head. "No, he begged us." "Why?" "C'est this." Claire looked up at me, her eyes suddenly sharper. "Because someone tried to kill him twice. The second time, it wasn't going to be a warning." I lowered myself slowly into the chair across from her. "Who was trying to kill him?" "I can't tell you that. But I can tell you this. Your husband stumbled onto something. Something that put you and your daughter in danger. He was told to walk away quietly or risk losing everything. So he chose to vanish. And you just helped him throw his life away." Claire leaned in. "He was dying, one way or another. This way, at least he had a shot." I wanted to scream, throw something, ask why she got to be with him now, while I'd been left to grieve alone. But then she reached into her purse and slid an envelope across the table. "He left this for you. Told me to give it to you only if you found me." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a photo. Me, Jacob, and our daughter, taken 3 years ago on the Oregon coast. On the back, written in Jacob's familiar scrawl, "You are my real life. Everything else was survival." Tears filled my eyes. My throat tightened until I could barely breathe. Claire watched me. "He never stopped loving you, but love wasn't going to keep you alive." I stared at the photo, the edges worn, like it had been handled often, carried, treasured. He had been gone for months, but in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't chasing a ghost. I was chasing a man who still believed I could save him. The photo haunted me. Every wrinkle on its surface felt like a scar, one for each lie I'd unknowingly lived through. Claire had vanished after giving it to me, disappearing down the sidewalk like a shadow dissolving into daylight. No trace, no goodbye. Back home, I locked my daughter's door, turned on the TV loud enough to drown any sound, and opened Jacob's notebook again, this time with new eyes. In the margins of the entries, I noticed initials. Some I recognized as our friends, others didn't fit. MK, Seattle. TR, Warehouse, Route 18. ED, must disappear by Sept 14. It wasn't a diary, it was a ledger. Names, targets, deadlines. This wasn't some escape fantasy. Jacob had been operating, actively, for years, beneath my nose, in our home. I started combing through our old emails, texts, and bank statements. Patterns emerged. Business trips that didn't align. Expenses labeled contractor or consulting that came from accounts I'd never seen. One charge was for a burner phone. I had never questioned it before. Now it chilled me. He'd built 2 lives. One filled with soccer practices, backyard BBQs, and family photos. The other, coded meetings, surveillance equipment, black SUVs in cash-only motels. I found a receipt dated just 5 weeks before his death. It was for a storage unit. The address was 2 towns over. I didn't hesitate. The man at the front desk gave me the unit number after I flashed Jacob's old ID and said I was his wife. I'm not sure if he bought the lie or just didn't care. Inside, the storage space looked empty until I noticed the false wall. Behind it were boxes, dozens, labeled by year. Inside, phones, hard drives, documents, some in languages I couldn't read, and photos, so many photos. One of me and our daughter, taken from across the street. Another of a man I didn't know, stepping into a black car, dated, time-stamped, annotated. Jacob hadn't just lived a double life. He'd been watching us from the outside, even after he disappeared. And among the files, I found something else. A birth certificate. Not Jacob's, not our daughter's. It belonged to a child named Isaac Monroe, born 5 years ago in El Paso, Texas. Listed mother, Claire Hastings. My heart stopped. He hadn't just built a new life, he'd built a new family. All this time I thought he was protecting us. But what if we were just one part of a plan he had already outgrown? What if the man I married was never really mine? And yet, in the photo he left me, his eyes still held the truth I couldn't ignore. He had loved me, deeply, fully, but he had also lied for years. And now I had to choose, dig deeper into the world that swallowed my husband whole, or burn every trace of it and finally start breathing again. The accident that was supposed to kill Jacob happened on October 11th. The date burned in my memory like a wound that never healed. But after everything I'd uncovered, his coded notebook, the hidden storage unit, the second family, I couldn't ignore the gnawing question anymore. What really happened that day? I started with the police report. The crash had occurred on Interstate 5, a two-vehicle collision, only one fatality. The other driver survived with minor injuries, but had refused to give a statement. No charges were filed. His name, Victor Reed. I sat back in my chair, heart racing. Victor. I found a number tied to one of the burner phones in Jacob's stash. It still worked. I didn't expect anyone to answer, but a voice did, calm, steady. If you've made it this far, you already know who I am. I didn't speak, just listened. You've got questions. You want answers. So here's one. Jacob didn't fake his death. I did it for him. Because the people he was working against found out he was feeding us information. Who is us? I asked. Let's just say we do the work your government denies ever existed. Why now? I asked. Why let me find the trail? Because he begged us not to erase you. Silence. Victor continued. He made us promise that if something happened, we'd leave breadcrumbs. Just enough, so if you really wanted to find him, you could. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted the salt on my lips. But why the accident? I whispered. He was burned. They were closing in. We had to make it real. One body, one coffin, one fire. We made it look messy. I closed my eyes. Whose body was it? There was a pause. A man who wanted to disappear more than Jacob did. My stomach turned. So you used him. He volunteered. That didn't make it better. Where is Jacob now? I asked. Victor exhaled. Alive, but not safe, not yet. And the woman, Claire, the child? Another silence. Collateral Jacob chose to protect. People they would use against him if he returned to his old life. He had a life, I said sharply. With me, with our daughter. I know, Victor said. And that's why he never let us erase you. He said if anyone deserved the truth, it was you. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Thing. Jacob hadn't just vanished. He'd sacrificed everything to keep something darker away from us. But at what cost? A fake death. A secret life, a new child, a war behind the curtain I had never been invited into. And yet he'd left a trail, not to come back, but so I could find him. So I could decide whether to bring the past back into the light or let it die with the man I once thought I knew. I drove for 13 hours straight. The coordinates in the notebook, the ones listed over and over again, led me to a weathered building on the edge of a cornfield near Gary, Indiana. It looked abandoned. Paint peeling, windows boarded, but the black SUV out front told me someone was inside. I sat in my rental car for almost an hour. What would I say? What would I do? After everything, after the lies, the second life, the child he never told me about, did I still want to see the man who broke me? I wasn't sure, but I knocked anyway. The door opened before my fist landed a second time. And there he was, Jacob, alive. Older, thinner, beard rougher than I remembered. But those eyes, still his, still mine. He didn't speak, neither did I. We just stared. He stepped aside and I walked in. The air smelled like old wood and coffee. Maps covered the walls. A laptop blinked quietly on a desk. There were photos of Claire and the boy, and one photo of me and our daughter, pinned right above his bed. I wasn't supposed to let you find me, he finally said. I nodded. You didn't. You wanted me to. His face broke. I never stopped loving you. But you left me. I had to. You let me bury you, Jacob. You let our daughter grow up believing you were dead. You made me question my sanity. His hands trembled. I wanted to tell you everything, but I cut him off. But you didn't. You made a choice. And now I get to make mine. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. The contents of the storage unit. All the names, all the evidence, everything he'd tried to keep hidden. I could take this to the FBI right now, I said. I could blow this whole operation apart. You'd be hunted by the same people who tried to kill you. And maybe that's justice. He nodded slowly, eyes shining. If that's what you need to do it, I'll understand. I stared at the drive. Then I dropped it to the floor and crushed it under my heel. He gasped. Why? He whispered. Because I loved you once. And I won't let that love turn me into someone vengeful. His shoulders sank with relief, but I didn't move closer. I'm not forgiving you, I said, and I'm not staying. Tears rolled down his face. I just came to say goodbye, this time for real. I walked out, never looking back, and as the door shut behind me, I felt something strange. Not closure, not peace, but control. For the first time in months, maybe years, I was choosing the ending. Not him, not Victor, not fate. Me. I never told anyone I saw him. Not my daughter, not his mother, not even the therapist who tried to stitch me back together after the first funeral. The truth is, I buried my husband twice, once in a coffin and once in my heart. The man who returned my gaze in that cabin in Indiana wasn't the man I married. He was a ghost wearing Jacob's face, carrying the weight of secrets that had nothing to do with the life we built together. I didn't forgive him. Some wounds run too deep, but I didn't destroy him either. I chose silence over revenge, distance over chaos, for the sake of my daughter, for the sake of who I used to be. Every so often, I think about the boy in Texas, his new son. I wonder if he'll grow up hearing stories about a woman named Emily who once loved his father so fiercely she let him go rather than break him. Maybe. Or maybe I'll stay a shadow in their lives, just like he became one in mine. But I know this, the man I buried the second time didn't belong to me anymore. And this time, I walked away with both eyes open.